Today, we're basically performing an autopsy on a giant. We're trying to figure out not just when the Roman Republic died, but why. What were the diseases, the deep internal failures that led to one of the most spectacular collapses in all of history? Let's begin the examination. And we're going to start with this quote from the Roman historian Sallust, because it just cuts right to the heart of everything. We have this image of Rome as this great bastion of freedom, but was it really? This idea right here that maybe, just maybe, most people would trade their liberty for a little bit of stability, that is a huge clue in our investigation.
So first, let's look at the physical body of the Republic, the city of Rome itself. It was the center of the world for sure, but man, was it a place of deep, jarring contradictions.
What's so wild here is the massive gap between the propaganda and the reality on the pavement. Rome boasted about its incredible engineering, right? The aqueducts. But for most of the million people crammed in there, life was lived surrounded by filth. The city promised community, but what it really delivered was this crushing density in these rickety, teetering apartment blocks. It was a city of gods and sewers, of marble and malaria, all at the same time.
Just try to imagine the sheer sensory overload, a constant noise of construction and rubble. You've got funeral processions and supply wagons literally fighting for space in these tiny streets. And the smell, the stench of garbage pits clashing with the perfumes from rich people's tombs. Politics was everywhere like a virus, election slogans scrawled all over sacred monuments. This wasn't just a city, it was this high-pressure cooker of humanity, totally vibrant and disgustingly squalid all at once.
And this, right here, this gets to the real crisis. For a Roman, community was everything. Being a citizen meant being part of the group. But this new urban life was creating a brand new kind of poverty, a social, spiritual loneliness. Being stuck up on the top floor of a slum, totally isolated, that was the exact opposite of what it meant to be Roman.
Okay, so let's move our examination inward. Let's look at the Republic's metabolism, this relentless economic engine that was fueled by conquest and, well, exploitation.
80,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's the number of Romans and Italians, men, women, and children, who were slaughtered in a single horrific night in the province of Asia. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was a coordinated explosion of pure hatred, a violent backlash against decades of Roman greed.
So who was driving all this greed? Well, meet the Publicani. You can think of them as the state-sanctioned corporate raiders of the ancient world. They'd bid for the contracts to collect taxes, and then every single coin they could squeeze out of the locals beyond what they owed the state was pure profit. Their methods were brutal. They essentially turned governing into a hostile takeover. And here's where you see just how corrupt the whole system was. You had the senatorial governors who provided the military muscle and the political cover. And in return, the Publicani provided the cash, huge profits for their shareholders, and massive campaign donations for the politicians back in Rome. It was a cozy little arrangement, a military fiscal complex where the elite got filthy rich and the people in the provinces paid the price.
So here's the bottom line, and it's absolutely crucial. The glittering wealth of the Republic, all the fancy villas and the victory parades, it was all built on a system of mass slavery on a scale the world had never seen before. Millions of people, torn from their homes to die in mines or work on these enormous factory farms. This wasn't some unfortunate flaw in the system. This was the system.
Okay, that brings us to the political heart of the Republic. And let me tell you, it was running a fever. A raging fever of hyper-competitive, all-consuming ambition for personal honor, or what the Romans called gloria.
This quote just nails the sickness perfectly. For the Roman elite, ambition wasn't just a career path. It was a full-blown addiction. Once they got that first taste of glory, they could never, ever have enough. It created this gnawing agony, this restlessness that drove them to bigger and eventually much more dangerous acts.
And here you have the two ultimate addicts, Pompey and Caesar. Now they took different paths to the top. You had Pompey, the master of PR, the guy who wanted to be the new Alexander the Great. And then you had Caesar, the supposed descendant of a goddess, a political genius who used both kindness and pure terror as weapons. But their bottomless ambitions put them on a collision course that the Republic was just not going to survive.
This was the ladder they all had to climb, the cursus honorum. Now, it was designed to give ambition some structure, but by the late Republic, it had turned into this absolute dog-eat-dog fight.
You had more and more senators competing for the same tiny number of top jobs, so the race to become consul got more and more desperate and way more expensive.
In a pressure cooker like that, there was just no room for mistakes. I mean, the legal system wasn't really about justice anymore. It was just another battlefield. A guilty verdict didn't mean you'd do some jail time. No, it meant your career was over, your property was confiscated, and you were exiled. It was political death. All right, let's look at the Republic's bloodstream now. This deep, never-resolved tension between the tiny, super-powerful elite and the massive Roman population who were, at least in theory, the ultimate source of all power.
And that brings us to the central paradox of the whole republic. I mean, on paper, the people had enormous power. They could pass any law they wanted, they could elect the top officials, but who was really in charge here?
The whole Constitution was basically a hall of mirrors. It was a mess, honestly. Even the Romans couldn't agree on what it was. As you can see, it had some elements of a monarchy with the two consuls, some elements of an aristocracy with the Senate, and a dash of democracy with the assemblies. This ambiguity just created constant instability, with all these different power centers always fighting each other.
And hey, if you want a perfect example of what happened when you actually tried to use the people's power for reform, just look at the Gracchi brothers. They tried to use the people's assemblies to get land for the poor. And the elite's response? Pure, unprecedented political violence. Tiberius was literally clubbed to death with a piece of furniture. His brother Gaius was hunted down and killed later on. The message couldn't have been clearer. Challenge the status quo, and we will kill you.
So after the Gracchi, a whole new breed of politician shows up, the populares. Now these were still aristocrats, guys like Caesar, but they were smart. They realized, hey, I can use the power of the people as a weapon against my rivals in the Senate. And that's exactly what they did, turning the populace into a tool for their own personal ambition and destabilizing the system even more. So, all of these sicknesses, the urban rot, the imperial greed, the toxic ambition, the political chaos, it all finally led to one fatal spasm. This is it, the moment of death. And the end, it came so fast. In just 6 years, the whole thing came crashing down. Caesar crosses the Rubicon, civil war explodes, Pompey gets defeated and then murdered, Caesar himself is made dictator for life, and then bam, he's assassinated, and finally, a new military junta takes over and starts hunting down its enemies, formally executing whatever was left of the Republic.
But you know, if we had to pinpoint the exact moment of death, it might be this one. When Caesar marched on Rome, the Senate ran. They fled. And in that moment, they abandoned the city, its sacred temples, and its people. The Republic wasn't just an idea, it was a real physical community. By running away, the elite betrayed that community, and they lost their legitimacy forever.
So, what's our final autopsy report? Maybe the best way to sum it all up is with Cicero's own haunting words. He argued that the Republic's liberty, all that relentless competition and ambition, had led it directly into slavery under one master. But then he leaves us with this chilling follow-up, a question that echoes from his time all the way to ours. What comes next? What is the fruit of that slavery?